Hello and welcome back to Off Picture Discussions. My name's John Capone. Up next is a conversation with Alexander Sharp. Alex is a writer-director. He released his debut feature film, Wired Shut, in November of 2021. It is a home invasion thriller shot in Vancouver, British Columbia. Alex is from Vancouver, and we had a great discussion. We went to LMU together. We talked about the film school days. We talked about storytelling at a young age and what made us want to become writers and directors. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and thanks again for watching. Alex Sharp, it's good to be with you. Thank you so much for joining me for a discussion here. I want to kick this off just by asking what attracted you to become a filmmaker? If you could go back to your earliest years where you started watching movies, what was that feeling like when were you captured by the magic of the big screen or maybe a VHS? And
Yeah.
when did it start for you?
Yeah, VHS. Wow, damn. I mean, that's got to be like Lion King on VHS. I remember we had that.
Yeah, the Disney
Um,
movies. Disney movies.
yeah, all the Disney movies. Um, for me, it was really my sister, actually. My sister was the first one to. I mean, I was always the kid who was filming his Legos with my dad's point and shoot, with
Same.
no.
I was
Yeah,
doing the
you
same
get it.
exact thing.
Now, okay, now I have a question about that because.
I called it toyation instead of animation. Toyation. And I would put like flour. I don't want to hijack your experience, but
No,
I put like flour into a baking pan, and it was like a snow tundra, like the planet of Hoth, and do
that's
the same thing.
that's much more sophisticated. That's much more sophisticated. Um, uh, I actually have a question for you about this because this is amazing. And did you? And we're talking, toddler sized, right? Or
Right,
just
right.
above,
Yeah.
like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
4 or 5 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, did you edit yours?
I
Did,
did not. It for me it was like a rolling thing, and I think because I had my dad shoot while I like would man the figures, right, and have them interact and
yeah,
create up dialogue, spontaneous dialogue. And my dad, I remember watching some of these back later on. He would like because it was like the telephoto, like zoom in and then you could zoom out with the point and shoot or the Super 8 camcorder, whatever it was, and I just remember watching it, and it was like on this like medium shot, and all of a sudden the frame widens. He's zooming out, and he's showing me and my
and
sister
he's showing
like
you the
crouching over these Legos, and just like it was more about him capturing
dad.
the moment. I was like, and I'm like, Dad, are you? And I would look like sometimes the recording button wasn't even on. I'm like, are you recording, Dad? Like, what are you doing here? So I was like
A
running a tight
cameras,
ship. Yeah,
A cameras getting fired.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Toast, you're gone.
um, I wouldn't edit them either. You totally hands in the frame, and
Right.
even I would be on my desk for. I'd make little James Bond movies with my Legos, so I'd be on my desk for
Cool.
the bad guys layer, and then for a scene change, it would literally be stop dialogue, pick up the camera, and you would hear me breathing, running over to another room in the house, set it all up again, and then I would screen these things, and it was hilarious because the scene would just break, and it was just. And looking at the floor,
Just like crazy blur frame, like yeah, yeah,
because I didn't have any concept of editing. I thought movies were made in real time at
right,
that age.
right.
I thought they shot the whole thing at once. I didn't know. I didn't
That's a
understand.
good point. I remember having that mental shift too, like learning about editing or so, like my consciousness coming to the awareness of like, oh, these things are made in a stop-start way, and the whole machine of filmmaking is very different from just like a documentary of like real time. Yeah, because I mean, I think that's the magic of movies too, is the cut, right? How it
Yeah,
can feel so unconscious and seamless. And, when you're 8 years old watching even a Disney movie, your mind buys into, this sort of seamless experience. So it's wild.
totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and I'm sorry,
Was it
we're
James
totally.
Bond? Yeah, was it James Bond at the beginning for you?
Yeah, it would have been. I think that probably was the start. My dad got me two. I think I was six, and my dad got me two Bond films on DVD. One was Roger Moore's Spy Who Loved Me. The other was Sean Connery's Goldfinger, and he presented me with both of them. And he's like, "You ever seen James Bond?" And I was like, "Dad, I'm six." And he was like, "Okay, we'll pick one." And I picked Roger Moore, Spy Who Loved Me. And I can't remember
Nice.
why, but that was my first. And so Roger Moore is my favorite to this day as a result because he was my hero.
Very
And I
cool.
know that's controversial. Um,
Controversial
so
Bond pick.
yeah, yeah, he's like people's least favorite one.
Yeah. They had some crazy stuff going on. That was like what, like late 70s, right? Where the Roger Moore eras. Just like the style and everything was obviously that crazy 70s style, but it was fun, man, that
Super funny,
documenting that
super
time period.
campy,
Yeah, campy, yeah,
totally.
yeah.
It was ridiculous. But no, it must have started with that because I wanted to be James Bond. So I decided to make my own movies and cast my friends after high school where I could shoot them and kill the bad guy
Gotcha.
and do all that fun stuff. And I discovered through that silly process of like wrangling my friends unwillingly after school, bossing them around, that I liked filmmaking. And then I started doing other short films that were not at all action movies. They were actually sort of short dramatic films with a nice message.
Mm,
My first dramatic short film was called Thank You, and it was about gratitude. And I did that at 15 years old,
wow.
which I think really impressed my parents. And they were like, he might want to do this thing, this movie
Yeah.
thing.
Sounds like
And
he's
it
gonna
was,
like hop filmmaking, go right into politics. It's
I know,
gratitude.
I
World peace, the whole thing.
I know.
Yeah. Very impressed.
But when my sister started acting because she knew that's exactly what she wanted to do,
Okay.
um, I followed suit because I thought I wanted to do acting because I was acting in my own movies. I just thought that that's what I wanted to do, and
Mm.
it was when I went to acting classes with Christo Bublé, Michael Bublé's sister, who's now
Oh,
retired.
those
Yeah,
Vancouver
she coached.
people, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Small
That's right.
town.
Small town, small town. I eventually came to the conclusion that I actually preferred being behind the camera. So it was sort of a mix
Mm.
of all of that stuff. It's hard to pinpoint it.
Yeah, yeah. So these short films and like what was the flip of the switch for you in terms of, was it like a full light bulb moment? Oh, I'm just gonna do this now behind the camera. And what do you think attracted you to sort of the craft of filmmaking versus being the voyeur of an actor and sort of like the experience of the story? You know what I mean?
I think I just became. I mean, I was always kind of a geeky kid, so I think I became obsessed and addicted to gear and
Mm.
cameras and
Hmm.
editing software and the latest thing. And
Right.
through that, I kind of really fell in love with the process of
Yeah.
crafting an image. Oh God, I've lost my light. Can you still see me?
You look great still.
This is
It's a
awkward.
nice soft light you got coming from the upper left corner, so it's all good
I'm
either
just gonna
way.
I'm gonna fix this in 3 seconds. Three, two, one. Okay. Sorry about that.
No
Uh,
worries.
I think that's what it was. And and real quick, you also started as an actor, didn't you? And went on for much longer than me.
I mean, this is where our experience is so parallel because for me, it wasn't so much James Bond. It was like Indiana. I had a huge Indiana Jones phase and a huge Batman, like Michael Keaton Batman phase, And my parents tell stories of not only was I switching in and out of Batman and Indiana Jones costumes, but I'd get into a real like Phantom of the Opera kick when we went to see Phantom of the Opera for the first time. Athletes, sports player, football players, Jack Dawson, Titanic. So I think like to your point of just like wrangling people, and I grew up around my cousins who were all, I had like four or five cousins around my age, and we all grew up like, some of us, some of my cousins were two houses down, and
Yeah,
lived in somewhat of a rural area, so we had all this acreage and property to just kind of roam around, right? And that sort of expansion of imagination, I think it's easy to just go right into start playing out and acting out stories and characters, right? So
totally.
maybe that's where that little, that first bug of like, wanting to explore acting more, as I matured, adolescence, high school. I didn't really do too much drama or acting in high school. But in college, yes, I think going, as a film production major, I also took an acting class at Loyola Marymount University where we both attended, and yeah, got into acting more, and then took a 2-year Meisner program right out of LMU, and which I've talked about with other people, was sort of like a gateway drug for my writing more than anything else. So it kind of came back around, the acting and the directing, writing kind of, would bounce in and out of each other. But yeah,
Totally.
it's so interesting. I think it's great for directors to have, even if it was those early years, just that experience of what it's like to act, what it's like to pretend, as a character in a narrative. It's so crucial.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Did you ever stop family dinners to do a play in front of the table with a cape and a sword and like stab your sister or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, so I think around Christmas, because again, these kicks I would get on, my dad took me to see Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol play at the Rochester local theater troupe called Jiva Theater, and they still put this on every year, I think, and it's a phenomenal
Yeah.
production. It's very cinematic, actually. I think that's what dialed me and gripped me so much with this production. But I would go home because I also watched Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, the animated
Perfect.
one.
Perfect.
So like the synthesis of that gave me this idea to do like this like cardboard puppet show. I made like out of a cardboard box. I built this like proscenium stage and
Oh,
had
that's
like
good.
drew out the characters and like popsicle sticks and would like, put on the whole
Yeah.
show. My
Yeah,
parents and
totally.
relatives, my grandma would come over, they eat dinner, and I would, put on the show once a
Yeah.
night, and we would travel around to different, I would put
A
this
very
cardboard.
serious production.
It was, I mean, I was, again, like to the Toyation thing, I was like dialed in,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I just gotta tell this story. I was so, and I think that's what the genesis of this question was like, when you're gripped by whether it's a film or, even theater or, different types of media, you're so gripped by it. You want to put your hands on it and explore and mold the clay and see what you can do with it. You just want to engage, even before you have a thought of, oh, I want to express this feeling or this tone or this idea. You just that sort of unconscious act of wanting to, yeah, just put your hands on it and dive in, engage with it. So I think, I don't know what it was for you that made you want to pursue, directing as a career, but maybe talk about, from those early years of, Bond and some of those formative experiences with narrative, where did you make that decision? What was that tipping point for you to really study film in college?
Um, that's a really good question, and one that I actually don't have an immediate answer for.
A mystery.
Wow, I never really thought about that. I mean, I could think out loud for a minute
Sure.
because
We're
it
all
would.
about rambling here.
We're all about rambling. I mean, we've done enough of it already. This whole
Gibberish.
thing is terrible. Got it. Redo it. We got to re-record. No one's gonna
Rearrange the
watch this.
words.
Yeah.
No, but I
Who are
put you on
these
the
two
spot.
folks?
So let's eke an answer out of you. Let's do
Yeah.
some therapy here.
Well, sure. I okay, so I started making short films. Going into high school, I had done a number of, you know, amateurish, terrible today, stupid little action movies. And then I had done some serious attempts at serious stuff. I went to Catholic school, so I think I was kind of engineered in a way at a young age to put a good message on something, or I tried to find a meaning for, after I was done making action movies, which I love doing. I kind of was like, okay, what else can I do with this medium? Can I put a good message out into the world?
Mm,
And so I made that short film about gratitude. And then I proceeded to make all kinds of thematic shorts. Um, One was called Shadows, and it was about sort of the shadows that we carry and how those affect other people. I was kind of obsessed with the chain reaction thing of humanity, and I was
mm,
obsessed with the butterfly effect, if you will. Um, and so, and I had done movies about like regret, and so I think I was sort of geared into sort of thematic short filmmaking, so I could present people with a message, which I think I certainly got a lot of praise from my adult, the people that I looked up to, the friends of my parents. They were all kind of like, "This is really good work," and I, for the age I was, and so I think that validation had me taking it more seriously
mm,
and seriously, and how else I could do things. And then I started
yeah,
doing. I remember my first paid gig was a music video for a kid. Um,
cool.
and I did a commercial or something like that for the school, for my high school.
Yeah,
And then I think I just decided to go to film school. And of course, I was watching all kinds of cinema. I was just
sure,
like,
sure,
I couldn't get enough of it. I wanted to
right.
study Spielberg. I wanted to study Kubrick. I saw 2001 at a very young age, and it's still one of my favorite movies today. I was just like a cinemaphile at the same time.
Yeah. What do you
Cinephile.
I
Cinephile.
cinephile, yeah. What do you think that was? I'm always interested because when directors have such a strong voice as you do, and really you're an authority when you watch one of your movies, and I recognize this as early on as your shorts at LMU. There was you watch other students' shorts and yours were very gripping. You could there like I said, there was an authority in the image, the composition, the way you were thinking about cutting patterns and stuff. And yeah, you said it's kind of, you have a very clear idea of what you're underpinning the narrative with thematically. And so just to kind of like dive in, I'm always interested on like where directors and writers too sort of like develop their voice from, and that journey that they go on, and how, if there's a thread to their work that you can kind of connect the dots over their career. So do you think it was like a religious, I went to Catholic school as well too, that sort of like
Ah,
religious backdrop of meaning, and these sort of theological philosophical ideas that interested you? Because some kids sort of rebel against it. Some act it out and don't really know why they're acting it out. The whole religious ideology or orientation. But I can answer the question for myself after you. But I'm curious to hear your answer. Did you, was there a part of that sort of that structure or backdrop that was interesting that you wanted to explore and sort of like a bring it over into sort of a cinematic realm, this philosophy or theology, or some of the messages and elements of it?
yeah, I suppose, but I really couldn't tell you. Um, I mean, I guess again, it's so hard to pinpoint. God, I'd
Yeah,
have to think about it.
where
Fantastic
it comes
question.
from, right? Where it comes from,
Where it
because just
comes
like
from?
dialing in on one of those themes you mentioned, regret. It's like for
Yeah,
and how old were you at the time when you did say that short film or the gratitude one? You were in high school?
I was in high school. I was 15, and
Okay.
from about 15. Well, yeah. So tail end of high school. So grade 11, grade 12, and then
Yeah.
the summer of grade 12 before I went to LMU. I had kicked out, I don't know, maybe like f- anywhere from like 5 to 10 of
Wow.
these little 5-minute shorts,
Yeah.
and they were all theme based. There was no there was no real character study. It was not plot driven. It
Right.
was sort of like a man I came up with the idea for a film where a man gets divorced by his wife and he's sad, and his company is being liquidated because the spreadsheets are all red, and he every day he drives by a homeless guy and a girl who's on her morning run, and he always drives past the homeless guy. And
Hmm.
the third time he does it, because he's extra pissed off because of something, can't remember. Um, the homeless guy is so desperate that the homeless guy takes one look at his taillights leaving and then eyes the girl running. He kills the girl for cash. And after a change of heart in the businessman, of course, he's too late. He drives there the next morning to find the homeless man's disappeared and hears on the radio a story of a dead girl. And the film ends there on his reaction, having learned of this murder.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I was interested in doing. I was interested in sort of attempting to challenge an audience with an idea or a theme,
Yeah.
and how we're all connected as people and how we can make the world a better place together, as sort of
Yeah.
a trite teenager way of going about it. But
No,
I
I
think that
think, and that's why I
certainly
was interested to sort of pick at that question that you mentioned of sort of the religious, background, is because there's morality that is sort of the great question of religion, is how do we exist in a world in sort of a moral dimension where we see value in other human beings and goodness in other human beings, and like you mentioned, hopefully work toward progressing that vision of the human condition to a place that's more good and beautiful, so I think it's
absolutely.
very interesting, like you were playing with the ideas of the light and the dark, this man who was going through a really tough time, and acted there's certain impulses in the human design to of greed and lust and to kill her for the money, right? But obviously he felt some sort of obviously remorse and shame for that act at the end. So I mean, the beginning, middle, of an end is this sort of moral fable that at a young age, it's very fascinating.
Yeah,
You were so dialed into that.
I was, and morality is a great word that you just said that, because I was actually, I vividly remember I was obsessed with the idea of morality. What was right, what was wrong, and can it be clearly defined, or is there a really big gray area? That's what fascinated me, and that's, I think, what I certainly think that at such an early age came from, you know, my Catholic schooling, and certainly influenced what I wanted to do with a story and a camera.
Right. Yeah, it gave you like a frame,
100%.
right? A framing. Yeah.
Yeah, it gave me sort of a framing. That's a good word. A framing, a reason, other
Yeah.
than just to replicate, some action sequences that
Right.
have no real purpose other than for, me to laugh at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, or just
yeah,
say, "Oh, that was a cool, the way the toy car hit that wall or whatever, right? That was
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Some
yeah,
cool,
yeah.
some cool stuff." Yeah.
I think I wanted to be really self-important from a very young age.
Hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with a little ego. I think, there's a reason we have an ego as human beings. We just got to harness it, and when you use it in the right ways, I think you can be super productive and make some
Yeah,
cool shit. So
Sam,
I'm fine. I'm
Sam
fine with that.
Mendes. No,
What's
yeah,
that?
no. Sam Mendes has a good line. He says,
Okay.
uh, "Ego, ego. Sorry, confidence is important. Ego is not." And I had never
Ah,
heard
yeah.
that distinction before.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Which yeah, and I don't know how true it is, because I actually do think ego is kind of important in some way.
Yeah. Well, I think like I view the ego as, we don't have to get too psychological here, but I view the ego as like a is like a light, a beam of light that's an orientating light that's just always sort of pointing forward, right? It's not
Yeah.
focused on stopping to smell the roses and
No.
lateral moves, right? It's always kind of pointing forward. And there's
a time to move forward. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
like we said about religion too. It's sort of like a framing. You don't always act on it. You don't always need to satiate the ego, but it's important to listen to. I think it should be some sort of guide. Use it, harness it as a guide, right?
Yeah. Harness is
Um,
a good word. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Agreed.
So you're, moving through high school, then you're at LMU. I assume you learned a lot at LMU, met a lot of cool people. I'll speak for myself in saying, it was such a great experience and community to really, sort of plug into a network of filmmakers and the resources that we had at Loyola Marymount University. Um, what was that like? If you want to touch on it briefly, your experience at LMU, and how was that sort of a launch pad into, the first phase of your career in your early to mid 20s?
Yeah, LMU was amazing. People. I mean, there's a lot of famous directors out there who actually. And I went into film school kind of knowing this. They all kind of say you don't need film school, just make a movie, and that's fair because you know perhaps you do learn more making a first feature as opposed to going to film school. Maybe there's an argument for that, and I think there is. But the real value of LMU was the fact that you and I are talking right now,
Right. Yeah.
and that I hang out with Blake all the time. I chat with Matt all the time.
Right.
Um, if I was to make it created a network,
Yeah.
a valuable network, and and that's the real win. Because I made all these friends.
Yeah.
Um, who wanted to do the exact same thing. So, yeah, LMU was fantastic. I remember going to tour LMU and touring USC and touring Chapman, and I remember choosing LMU because of the way I felt when I was touring the campus and touring the film school. And I
Mm.
was already
Hmm.
coming from Canada, so I was already kind of feeling a little homesick,
Sure.
just in the idea of moving somewhere without my family or any friends
Right.
and going somewhere else for 4 years. Something about LMU's campus won, but really it was the idea that everything was very very supportive. Everyone was working on each other's films, and everyone got to do a film.
Right.
That was
Right.
my big problem actually with USC. Not everyone got to do a film, and
Yeah.
I didn't like that attitude. I thought it was
It,
very
I
cutthroat,
agree with
and
you. I think LMU felt more democratic in that way. It felt more
everyone got a
of an open
chance.
community. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I without hesitation accepted LMU, and I don't regret it at all. I mean, Blake, Matt,
Yeah.
Jared,
No,
you know,
great people.
all
I
those
mean,
guys.
and I think it's important too, and this is, something that is so cool about the history of cinema too, is like everyone has these different access points. Like it was James Bond for you, it was Indiana Jones and uh, Star Wars and the Michael Keaton Batman for me. And people are coming from different places around the country and have different. We're still young, obviously, but different experiences to a certain degree, and interested in different things, and that type of diffusion of at an early sort of nascent period of creativity, of passion for film. Yeah, I remember I met Jared Seltzer in our orientation groups, and he was just such a live wire of a kid, like just super
Totally.
passionate about Tarantino and Spike Lee and films I hadn't even watched before. And he was like,
Yeah.
at the time he was like, the new Tarantino movie Django Unchained, the script leaked online. You could find it online,
Right.
and it was like the
Right.
movie hadn't even come out yet, and I was like, who is this kid? He's such a little rebel, little film cinephile rebel here. I love it.
Total encyclopedia. He's a walking
Yeah,
encyclopedia. And it's
absolutely.
unbelievable. I'm
Yeah.
convinced he's seen every single film that's ever been made.
I wouldn't doubt
Even
it.
he's the same today. I mean, he's the exact same. It's brilliant. He's
Right.
so passionate. He's
Yeah.
yeah, um,
Yeah, but
yeah,
those types of experiences, I think, to your point, and I think it was like Christopher Nolan was like rejected from certain film schools, like wanted to go but couldn't get in, and then claims. I think he had some sort of film society at whatever school in London he went to, but says, "Oh, I didn't go to film school," and so you don't need to. And I agree with that quote of the. I think it's Kubrick. The best way to learn how to make a movie is to make a movie, and that's sort of like a bottom line truth. But I think that having the experience, and sort of that that creative, passionate fervor of learning film and engaging with film and sharing the experience of film. Some of my favorite moments in film school was that first semester, art of the cinema, walking out of that class. I think Jared was in that class. I'm trying to think who else was in that class, but just like the chatter, the banter after watching, I think we watched Bonnie and Clyde and Taxi Driver, and even I think it was Wally. We watched, just all over the map.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you would just be talking about it because the first time you watched it, maybe you weren't watching it under sort of a critical lens, but you wanted to talk about it in this framing of criticism, positive, obviously positive film criticism, and
and
deconstructing
and
what worked about it.
and discussion, and that's so true, because you're sitting in a theater full of not audience members. You're sitting in a theater full of your peers who are all wanting to study film and be filmmakers. So like,
Yeah,
yeah, no, those discussions were amazing. I
yeah,
I um I also I'm really really grateful for the fact that and I think maybe it was an LMU thing as well, because of their attitude of everyone is the same playing field and everyone gets a bite at the apple, but
yeah.
everyone helps with everybody as well.
Right.
So, I remember being very eager from freshman year just to be a grip. And I think
Yeah,
George Alcott and I did that for, the first. I actually remember the first. It was a it was a grad senior thesis, and George and I were just gripping on this thing, and it was like, "What's a C stand? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Oh, you're pointing the source. That's a source four, and you're pointing it at the ceiling with a blue gel to get the room to be sort of a diffused blue. You're bouncing off the
Ambient
ceiling.
blue. Yeah,
Unreal,
yeah,
and you're
yeah.
just
Just these
learning all
ideas.
these little tricks of the trade that you know."
Hmm.
These new things, all while just like pulling cable, and
Right,
that was fantastic, because it was also very humbling, because
right.
you also get you know I think that was important for the core group that came out of LMU. We kind of all stuck together because we enjoyed doing that stuff, except for Blake.
Yeah.
Blake never ran cable. Blake just wanted to direct off the bat.
He was too good for cable and went right to James Mangold, right into his
He was too
arms.
good. He went right. He went right to the top. Yeah. What can you do?
No, yeah, I agree. I think that first semester I was a boom op on a grad,
I
thesis or
remember you as a
whatever.
boomer.
Really, were you on that same project?
I don't know, but I remember you holding a boom. I
Yeah. Oh
remember
yeah.
that now, and
Oh yeah.
I
I
didn't
I
until you just said it.
I have the memories of that. Those 12-hour days holding a
Yep.
boom, above, which
Yeah.
it was thankfully only one weekend they shot, but like, man, was that a baptism by fire? But I
It's-
totally agree with you. I think there's something about just getting yourself on set and sitting into the sort of that whatever that organic creative nature is that is a film set, right? Just sitting into it, feeling what it's like to be on a set, and just,
yep.
yeah, just not thinking too much about trying to learn too much, but just letting these things kind of hit you, and just, yeah, soaking in that experience of what the machinery of a film set is like. Super important. super important.
Yeah, and watching your peers or even the senior students who are like gods to you at freshman year, it's like, oh my God, I'm this is the senior student. He's like the Spielberg of the film school at the moment, or
Right,
whatever the impression that you've come up with is about
right,
these older, more experienced students. Watching them kind of get spun, and just sort of watching them kind of maybe trip, maybe fall, just
yeah,
in maybe
yeah,
little things like, the scene isn't working or something, and listening to those conversations with the director
right,
and the DP about how to get, and the sun's setting, we don't have enough time. Run that C stand up the hill. Come on, we got to get this shot. Like just watching, because it's chaos. The film.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
Still
not
is.
easy at
Yeah,
all. It
yeah.
still is. It
It's
still
all.
is.
It
It
always
never.
is. Yeah,
And it's incredibly educational just to sort of listen to those conversations and see people succeed and fail. And Jared says this. Jared says, um, I mean, there's this quote by Ira Glass. I think it's Ira Glass. It's like, fail as fast as possible or something like that.
mm,
And Jared says, film school is not about what film school's brilliance is that it creates an environment, a safe environment, so that you can fail.
yeah,
You can make a movie that sucks, that will not matter. And I wish I kind of knew this more at the time, because when you make your senior thesis, you think you're really going to go somewhere with it.
yeah. You think
And
it's an interview for a $50 million feature that they're going to hand you right out of graduation, right?
and it doesn't matter at all. And that's the fantastic thing about it, because my
Yeah.
senior thesis was a failure, because I tried to do a comedy, which I'd never done before. And I remember being in Mayer Theater screening it, and no one laughed. And it was like, oh man, it's like a cattle prod. But that was so helpful, because
Yeah, yeah.
no one
Seeing
ever, that movie
what
doesn't
doesn't
exist
work.
anymore.
Yeah, seeing what doesn't work. There's more utility in that, right? In sort of this creative artistic journey we're on. There's more utility in seeing what doesn't work than, acing some sort of audience score, right? And giving
Yeah,
people exactly what they want. Now, to be Christopher Nolan coming off of your opening weekend of The Dark Knight in 2008, I'm sure that's one hell of an
yeah,
experience, right? When people are just like,
no
"Whoa,
kidding.
what the fuck happened to the
Yeah,
history of cinema in this sort of, lightning in a bottle moment?" But up until that point, you only need one of those, really. I mean, you only need one of those in a whole lifetime to really, feel
you
like
only
you're a
need to make it
success. But
once.
that's right, right. You can fail, but you can fail as much as you can afford to fail, right?
Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
there's really something to be said for that. It's an awesome idea for sure.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so okay, now coming out of LMU and getting into, what was your experience like? That sort of like, they drop you off at the bus stop in the middle of nowhere and say, okay, this is the rest of your life. Now coming out of this safe sort of place to fail at LMU, and then, what was your next step really? I assume you knew you wanted to be a director and stay in that line of pursuit. What were your next ideas? Did you continue to make shorts and play around in a short form? And then eventually, when did you decide, okay, it's time for a feature film?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I had all these wild ideas, about okay, what's going to be my first feature, and this is a conversation that Blake and Jared and I would always have, and mostly for fun, um, 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 and after I graduated, I mean, I don't know that I had a feature in mind. I think I knew I was still very young. I think in the back of my mind, I knew I'm quite a patient person. I realized that about myself, and I think I was more patient then than I am now. And I think I was self aware in that I knew no one was going to listen to a 21-year-old or however old we were. Like I
Yeah,
knew
yeah,
that like, so I just figured I better get a job and I better start and I better just see what this industry is like.
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks because you go into film school and you're at the bottom of the food chain, wrangling cable, and then you get all famous with your junior thesis and senior thesis films among the professors and the staff and your peers.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I saw your film in the Mayor Theater. Congratulations! And then we all go to Paramount Studios and film outside the frame. Is that what it was called?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And and then and then they go, okay, bye, have
Yeah.
fun, and then
Yeah.
you go, yeah, boom, right back to the bottom again. I got a job at in my 5th year in LA on a temporary work visa. I got a job at Universal Studios, NBC Universal, inside the Abbott and Costello building, on Angie Tribeca. Rashida Jones is Steve Carell's produced sort of
Cool.
sitcom, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Cool.
Um, and I was an office PA, and driving a golf cart across, past. I would actually drive a golf cart with accounting papers past Amblin,
Oh
Amblin's
yeah. Yeah.
gate. Yeah.
Spielberg's. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It's very
I did
cool.
that for a year, and then my visa expired, and I didn't get sponsored. Because I wasn't organized. I was young and I just didn't get myself organized.
Yeah.
So I moved back to Vancouver, and I immediately jumped on film sets as a locations production assistant. And they stuck a traffic vest on me and said, "Okay, stand there for 15 hours, and we'll come back at hour 7 to give you a brown paper bag with a sandwich, and then we'll come back to get you
Jeez.
at 15 hours." And Vancouver is like rain city, so you're in, you know, a rain shell umbrella. You're just with a walkie-talkie. Action, action, rolling, rolling, cut,
Yeah.
cut. Yes, you can walk now. Yeah, yeah. Okay, rolling. Everybody stop. You do that, and I remember I did that for a year, and I ended up writing. I had so much spare time doing that
Mm.
job that I would write entire feature length scripts on a Final Draft app on my iPhone during my day or
Wow.
night.
Wow.
And I completed my first feature film script. And I had talked to my superiors, but it's so departmentalized, and the locations guy can't really get you anywhere. You can move laterally maybe, but you don't want to go to camera, because if you go to camera, you're going to be an AC, and then you're going to be a career AC. It's like, I
Yeah.
want to direct. It's like, geez, Louise. And so I
Yeah.
think I watched a lot of podcasts and consumed a lot of information on my idols that were out. Like Cary Fukunaga did a
Mm.
podcast that was like, the way to direct is just to direct. And I
Yeah.
remember that
Yeah.
quote from him in an interview long ago stuck with me. And it was
Yeah.
like, okay, great, I'm just going to direct. And I decided to quit because I had no time as a
Yeah.
PA.
Right.
And when I did have time on Saturday and Sunday, I was exhausted. So all I wanted to do was be on my laptop.
Right.
So I went into restaurants, and I worked in restaurants for 3 years as a manager, at between two different chains. And I developed my first feature film while doing that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's
that was
that's
Wired Shut.
awesome. I had this conversation recently with someone where we were saying the same thing. It's like it's better a lot of the time, when you don't feel like, okay, this position is going, there's going to be some sort of door that's going to open where I'm going to suddenly feel like I'm in the zone now of being able to direct as freely as I want, or that people will hire me enough to just put this together, that it's better to do something completely different, because it kind of allows you to keep this creative reservoir. And even better if you can, not have to work 80 hours a week where you're completely slaughtered on the weekend, like you were saying. But the ability to sort of like be able to step away, because a creative job can be so draining and taxing on your personal life as well, that until you're figuring out that exact orientation of, okay, now I'm self-sufficient on my director or writer salary, one project every couple of years, you get into that groove, that zone. Until you're
Yeah.
there, the ability to kind of jump around and have different experiences that will allow you that time, to sort of have this rest, that creative reservoir, like I was saying, is I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial for what, people who are in our zone right now, young directors, should be doing. So,
My mentor, Fred Iroff, who was my screenwriting 200 professor, second year at LMU, who is one of my best friends to this day. And I visit him at his house, and I know his wife very well, and I don't even consider him an ex-professor anymore. He's just a friend. He said, I remember texting him about the fact that I was going to quit my job as a PA and go into restaurants so that I could focus on film. And he said, he called it a tactical retreat.
mm, yeah, yeah, I like that.
And I think that was, I think that was about right. Um, uh, Certainly resulting in what Wired Shut was for me at the time.
Yeah,
Contextually, I think it is. I think it's a smart thing to consider. For young directors coming out of college who want to direct and they know they want to direct.
yeah.
Um,
But
Try
that's the
something
bottom
out.
line. You have to know you want to do it. I remember I took a job as well, first it was a development assistant internship, I think junior year at LMU, or that summer between junior year, senior year. And I was in the development department at a production company that I think they did Hatfields and McCoy's Texas Rising on the scripted side, and then did Gene Simmons' Family Jewels and Marriage Boot Camp on the unscripted side. It was this strange, like just stereotypical, like, LA production company, just all over the map. But um, we were in the development. I was in scripted development, and the projects I would get were absolutely fascinating. There was like a Rat Pack documentary they were developing. There was something on a hurricane in Galveston that I think the writer of Devil in the White City, Eric Larson, had done. I think it was him. So it was like these really
Yep.
fascinating concepts and premise, for more scripted stuff. But the part I knew where I was like, okay, I'm not going to last long here, is when I wanted to hold on to those ideas. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be doing this work for someone else. I want to develop my own projects.
Yeah.
And it's not in this control way. It's just like, I feel like I'm the person to tell this story. And I'm not saying I'm the person to tell the Rat
No. No.
Pack or
No.
this Galveston hurricane story, but you get those feelings of like, I know the
Yeah.
stories I want to tell, and I
Yeah.
have to blaze a trail where I should be and will be developing that sort of creative voice and authority over that. And that is something that from a young age, I think if you could, the earlier you start, the better. But also allow yourself to have experiences that really shape and inform this, is just know that you want to do it, just commit
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
I'm going to write, and I'm going to direct. I think directing is an extension of writing in a lot of ways, but I have a creative voice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's an interesting point. Directing as an extension of writing. I think I agree with that because they teach you in writing. They teach you in the don't direct from the page.
Mm,
But that really refers to the specific terminology to a screenplay, such as camera soars into room and booms down and racks focus to. You don't want to be writing scripts like that. And I agree. I don't use any camera action in my writing unless very seldom. Seldom do I do that.
yeah, no, I think what I mean by writing is not that
Well,
mechanical, slug
no, no.
line,
Well,
like writing as like the authorship of, this character is expressing this thing in a scene. You know, this sort of that
Yeah.
underlying dramaturgy. That's, to me, there is, I think, like great writers. Yeah, maybe they a lot of great writers have no aspirations to direct, right? They just, that's just not their thing. But they are
Yeah.
telling a story the same way a director is telling a story. Is author. They're both author. There's some sort of
That
crossover there,
that
you know? Yeah.
that's exactly. I wanted to just clarify. Aside from that specific example of the terminology of it, my point was is that because I absolutely agree. My point was is that um, good writers, while they may not direct from the page, they still are directing from the page.
Right.
Because
Right.
if you, I mean, you don't need to say camera soars into room and man sits. John enters room and sits on couch. I mean, that's an image you're putting in my head, and you
Sure.
chose that image as opposed
Sure.
to any other
Sure.
scene you could have written. So, in some level, they're directing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think that's it's a question I want to ask you, but I want to segue into Wired Shut here because I want to keep us moving and be able to talk
Yes.
about your debut feature. So this was released, I think, November 2021 or was it
Yep.
November 20? Yeah, November 2021. So it's been out over a year now. And take me through the timeline of, leading up to the release, obviously, starting, I guess, as early as the writing process. I really wanted to know because you wrote this with a co-writer, with Peter, right? What,
Yep.
so what was that process like? How involved were you in the conception of the idea and then into the writing phase and obviously being, the final author as director?
Yeah. Wired Shut was, well, Peter and I had done a short film called Ziggy's Will,
That's right. Yeah.
which went all over the world in film festivals. We went to five, but they were pretty. They were. It was a good five, and it was a good run for what it was. And we had wanted to. The idea was is that we were going to do Whiplash. We were going to make the short film
Hmm.
from the featured script, and then
Yeah.
get the feature funded. Now that didn't happen. But what we sort of observed from going to film festivals, and they were a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. However, we kind of saw, I mean, we wanted to make a feature. That was our goal. So it wasn't out of spite, but we observed that when you made a short film, you were sort of isolated into short film block D at 10 a.m. on Sunday in a series of other short films.
Hmm.
And we saw on the same program on the front page, John Capone's Neon Bleed, 7 p.m. main auditorium.
Mm.
And it was
Mm.
like, oh my God, we just got to make a feature. Forget this
Yeah. Yeah.
nonsense of shorts.
Right.
So we came out of that experience saying, okay, how do we make a feature? What we got to make something that's 90 minutes for no money.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we just do it? And maybe it even isn't good. But let's
Right.
get into these festivals on that front page with a feature.
Right.
That was the goal. It was just to make a feature that would go to festivals. Now, Peter sent me a text saying, I got an idea. It's a home invasion thriller. And I love thrillers. So immediately I was like, oh my God, let's go. Um, and he was like, his jaw's wired shut. He has an estranged daughter, and the boyfriend chases them around and tries to kill them because the boyfriend's nuts. And we had just also seen Cape Fear, Robert
Mm.
Scorsese's Cape Fear, with
Yeah, I felt the Cape Fear vibes in Wired Shut. So nicely done
I,
there.
thanks. I love Max Cady. Max Cady was like I
Yeah.
was obsessed with that performance.
Yeah.
Anyways, we wrote it to make it feasibly.
Yeah.
We design. It was designed at the expense of, admittedly, at the expense of, um, you know, um, attention spans. we
Yeah.
we wrote it in one location with three characters
Right.
And not uh, we weren't really allowed to break the house, so we had to be quite careful with our stunts while still making them dramatically interesting. I mean, we couldn't break glass, which I would have if we had access to breaking the house, but it was a real house that, we were 25. It was
Right.
like a glorified senior thesis film. We Martin Tobe and Jacob Fuller flew up from LA. I flew them up, and we just
Yeah. So
they
talk
crashed at
talk a
my
little bit
parents'
about
house.
what that like how bare bones were you? Because obviously when you watch the film, it feels like a very polished, cohesive, unified, thematic, atmospheric narrative. It really does. I mean, you
Thank you.
executed, all the way around. The performances were great. The sound design was spectacular. Your compositions. You're a very visual director, obviously, and you really it was gripping the entire time. So obviously we watch it and we feel what this is a damn movie. This is I'd love to see this in a theater. What what were the sticks and bubble gum that were put together to make
Yeah,
such a fine product? Because I know you were
yeah.
working on obviously a micro budget.
Yeah, I mean, we had like no lighting. A lot of it was lit practically. It was just the house was just stunning. Which
Yeah,
we got the
yeah.
house for free because I knew. I mean, the sticks, the bubble gum was the fact that my dad knew a contractor who had family friend who had just finished building a house that was for sale but taken off the market for the month of March,
Wow.
pardon me.
Perfect.
And it was going to be taken off the market for a whole month.
Perfect.
And I said, would he mind if we went in there and filmed a short little cute movie about a father and a daughter
Yeah.
reuniting? I didn't tell
Very
him it was a
simple,
thriller
very
and
calm, very yeah.
nothing's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and they let us do it, and so that was a piece of bubble gum. And the crew was. Peter and I did it ourselves. Peter and I really pulled up our pants and we're just like, all right. I mean, we don't have a producer who's going to go,
Right.
all right, you can show up, Alex, and you can just call action. Everything's going to be, you know,
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
Pete, I organized a whole prop closet. I went and bought all the props myself. I bought airsoft guns from online.
Sure.
I went through the script, aligned it myself, just like I learned in film school. You do the highlighters and
Yeah,
pink for
yeah.
wardrobe and blue for
Break down,
whatever it is.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a whole closet. I knew there was a closet in the house that I wasn't going to shoot ever. So I took painter's tape and I taped all of the shelves and sharpied each little section of each shelf in this closet. And this is okay. This is Reed's gun, and it always goes
Wow.
there, guys. It needs to go back there. I mean, we were doing this. We were 25, and
Yeah.
and there was no one helping us, so we
Right.
had to do everything. And
Right.
and it was just an attitude. It was a revelation of yeah, we're making a feature, but what are we thinking is going to happen? I mean, let's just take the same attitude we had when we were 15 and we were inviting
Yeah.
our friends
Yeah.
over. My AD was my roommate.
Yeah.
Kevin Brown, he's my best friend. He'll be
Awesome.
the best man at my wedding. I've known him since
Yeah.
kindergarten. I said, I'll pay you. Can you come AD this thing? I'll teach you how to do it. Just run
Yeah.
the schedule and tell me when to stop shooting. And he
Sure.
organized lunches. I mean, it was, I don't know how to sum it up more than that. It was total bubblegum.
Yeah, no,
Everything.
I mean, I think all that matters really is that you're allowing the opportunity, that space for what is in front of the camera to happen, right?
Yeah.
However you have to do it, and you could keep your mind sane throughout the process,
Yeah.
to allow that openness and that creativity, that creative energy to flourish. Do
Yeah.
it. And there's no rules. That I think Christopher Nolan's first feature following was like maybe 30 grand, and
Yeah.
most of that went to film, buying the film and
Film
processing the
stock.
film.
Yeah.
So I mean, there really are no rules. And, not to say that was like the greatest, most interesting film ever made, but it was something. And this was the same, deal I made with myself too, deciding to
Yeah.
self-produce Neon Bleed. It's going to be a calling card. right? You
Yeah.
know there's going to be some door that's going to open on the other side of this process. We just need to create a space where you can bring something to the table, right?
Yeah.
Creatively, something interesting, an interesting story, an expression of your style or your interests as a filmmaker. And that's not to say that's all you need to do, because it's incredibly taxing and draining. It's
Yeah.
Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill, and it crushes you every time. Um, putting out so many fires and just overextending yourself. But you
Yeah.
learn a ton, and if that's all you
Yeah.
gain, that's going to propel you into your next project, however
Yeah.
that next opportunity comes. So yeah, and that's back to that idea of, if you have to direct, you just got to do it. You just got to do it at some point. So
You just got to do it, and you have to lose. You have to sort of be willing to drop this false apprehension that some executive will find your senior thesis and go, "You're a genius, and here's your chance."
right,
And further than that, you have to be perfectly willing to do whatever it takes. If you're taping boxes with painter's tape to make the props closet, like
right,
whatever it takes. And I'm an organizational
yeah,
freak, so I
yeah,
knew that if I was to be organized and if we had our checklist, it's like anything else. It's like anything else. If you
yeah.
organize yourself, you can do it. You can totally do it. Now, was I exhausted? And did I not want to do it again for a few years after I wrapped? I mean, I don't know how you felt on Neon Bleed, but after we wrapped on the Wired Shot, I was like, I'm
Oh
not going
yeah,
to
it
do
was
that
a
again
big
for a little bit.
hangover. I mean, it was like, yeah, absolutely. It was an afterglow. It was more of an afterglow, but there was a hangover too. It was like,
Yeah.
what did I just do? Like, you
Yeah.
exhaust so much just mental, psychic energy, creative
Yeah.
energy, and just physical energy, those hours, and just your mind always needing to be thinking of 10 different things at once. So many layers to make one shot happen, right? And as director producer, it's why it's like directors really shouldn't produce, because they're just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just so much that happens to both of those roles, that you need to be thinking of 10 different things at once, as just a producer or just a director. But to your point, just do what it takes. You can do it if you're organized and prepared, and it's only what's in the frame. That's it. I mean, plan the frame, right? And preparation is key.
Yeah.
I know you're a very visual person. You like to compose an image and really think about an image, and I assume you storyboarded and really had your shots pretty well worked out for the most part.
We had a shot list, which I did. I shot list all my work, but I don't think I I don't think I've once storyboarded.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I meant
I
shot list, like, at least having the idea. Okay, I've got this idea for this specific type of medium. Not necessarily that you need to draw it out, but when you shot list it, you know what that medium is.
exactly.
An approach to the visual style. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and no, that's. I mean, I went to when we were at LMU. I'm curious as to which one you did. When we went to LMU, we sort of had. I remember there was a choice. There was a mandatory directors 300, and then there was a mandatory junior cinematography, and then in senior year you could either choose senior directing or or advanced cinematography. And
Hmm.
where Blake and Jared went to advanced directing, I actually took advanced cinematography with Pete
Oh
Soto.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, interesting.
And I knew it's not what I wanted to do, and he would make fun of me all the time for it because he knew that I wanted to direct, and he was like, "Why are you even in my class, Alex?" And cinematographers are very proud people,
Yes, yes,
but
yes.
no, I was fascinated by. I've always been fascinated by lenses,
Yeah.
and cameras, and you know different lighting schemes, color grading. I color graded Wired Shut myself.
Oh wow, very cool.
Yeah, I ripped it away from Martin's claws. Um, uh,
No,
I
I understand because I've worked with the man himself, Andrew Franzak, and he's the
yes.
same way over stuff he shoots. He wants to color, and I totally understand that the relationship to the image, it's the whole image, and color is included. So I think at the very least, the cinematographer, and if you're a very visual director like yourself, obviously you're going to be in the color timing, the color grade. But I think cinematographers should be allowed to be in the booth as well, even if it's a
I know.
colorist, a
Yeah.
third
Yeah.
third
No.
party
And
colorist. So
yeah. I think the only real reason was that we were split geographically.
mm, mm,
Because after Martin left, after shooting it, you know, I we were 25. I wasn't really prepared. Neither of us were prepared for him to fly up or for me to fly down to book to
right.
color time together. I mean, I would send him shots, but because I'm always
Yeah.
curious about people's opinions, because
Yeah.
um, it's important to get feedback on any step of the process, as you know. But yeah, I'm probably too obsessive
That good
about
old that
things.
there's that good old ego,
Yeah. No,
that good
totally,
old ego.
totally. Yeah.
That's
I
good.
know. I know.
It's good stuff. Well, cool. So what now that the film is out in the world, how do you feel about that whole experience, that 2020 vision of doing it, like you said, setting out to do it because it was time, and now where you are right now, what does that experience mean to you?
It was more than I thought it was going to be. And I will be forever grateful for that whole experience and for its release and distribution and reviews and from people I've never met were talking about me as a director now
Right, right.
and the press, and it was mind blowing. And some people liked the film, some people didn't, and it was like, oh my god. I mean, it's like,
Yeah,
like the people are aware of you and your work now,
right.
where they weren't before. You were a nobody, but now you've done something.
Yeah,
People don't have a relationship to you. They'll say whatever they want about it if they liked it or didn't like it, and it was unreal. It was my first feature, and it's taken me the past year and a half, is that where we're at now, to sort of settle in with it, and it's about done now. I mean, our sales agent MPX just sold it to some production company in France like 2 weeks ago, so it's still making some rounds, but it's
hmm
basically done. Right? It's out
hmm
there. It's over. I mean, it's we're
yeah,
it, and I'm unbelievably proud of what Peter and I were able to do, and in my mind, it's a complete success because
sure.
we were 25.
The bar was so low, right? And I think there's a lot
We
to be said for that.
we
You
just
know?
wanted to go to a festival or two.
Right, right.
When we were at Manchester with Ziggy's Will, we saw a guy our age who had shot his first feature for $7,000 over 2 years on the weekends, and he was presenting and talking about it. And we just wanted to do that. We
Mm,
just wanted. We didn't think we were going to sell it,
hmm
but COVID hit and all the festivals shut down. So we were like, "What are we going to do?" And then we found MPX, and then we sold it, and then it was on Amazon, and then we got. 3 out of 5 skulls from Bloody Disgusting magazine, and and I was on Screen Rant, and the trailer was on IGN. It was like, it's
It's awesome.
it's unreal, and I'm super humbled to be able to say that we did that at that age. So it's on to the next one, really. I mean,
Yeah, and
I've
what is
also seen
next?
the movie. Oh,
What is next in the pipeline for you? I'm curious.
uh, I've written a feature not the one that I wrote while I was PAing. Some ideas from that went into it, but
Sure, sure.
otherwise, I mean, that one, you know. But I've written a feature that I want to do, and it's sort of in the same vein as Wired Shut, feasibility wise. In terms of, I've written it for a location that I have access to.
Hmm.
Um, it is more expensive, and as it should be.
Right.
Because the other thing I've realized is that if you really want to sell a movie, and I learned this after doing Wired Shut, like if you really, really want to sell a movie, you have to cast a name.
That's where we're at
If
now
you,
for our second feature as well.
yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
so same thing. It's, I mean, if you, and not that I have any chance of getting Brad Pitt, but to
Never
further my
know.
point, you never know. To further my point, if you have Brad Pitt in your movie, nothing else matters.
Right.
That movie's getting sold.
Right. Right.
And
And you could have a
that's
brilliant script, and if no one's in it, it's not going to get seen.
no
Relatively,
one cares.
right? Yeah.
Relatively, I mean, there are
People see it. Yeah,
circumstances where
sure.
you could get some distribution. I mean, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, if you want to go big,
Right.
you want to sort of see if you, and so of course that makes the budget bigger, right? And so unless you're best friends with Brad Pitt.
Yeah, no, I
But
mean, it's just a necessary evil. I mean, you understand why these films are millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, even hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, and the talent is the above the line is a huge portion of that budget, right? That's just
yeah,
the physics of Hollywood. So, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. Well,
but
that's how it's making the dough. That's how the
right,
thing's making the dough. It's because
yeah,
everyone wants to go see Tom Cruise.
right, exactly.
Top Gun isn't Top Gun without him.
Surely it is not. It is not. It can't be. It cannot be. But well, awesome. I
Yeah.
wish you the best of luck on that next project. I'm excited to see it come to fruition, as I have no doubt it will in the near future. And
Thank you.
yeah, it was awesome chatting to you, Alex. It was awesome catching up and getting the opportunity to kind of bounce some ideas, filmmaker to filmmaker, on our collective path as we all sort of move forward, and yeah, sharing this awesome community. So thanks, yeah, thank you so
Likewise.
much for joining me. Absolutely.
Likewise, John. And I'm excited to see your next feature.
Oh yes, yeah,
And
we'll
if
have to
anyone hasn't
talk more
seen
about
it
that.
yet, everyone go check out Neon Bleed by director John Capone.
Do a double feature, Wired Shut and Neon Bleed.
There you go.
And you could, yeah, it's, hey, they share somewhat similarities of a crime, slow burn crime,
Yeah. Yeah.
shenanigans going on. So
Absolutely. I think they complement each other. It'd be a good pairing.
I think so. I think so. I think it's a good double feature. So,
Which one do they start with first? How would
ooh,
you what
maybe, yeah, I think because I don't know, the home invasion thriller kind of feels like more of a nighttime vibe. Neon Bleed just has this crazy sort of like bubbly energy. It's written more as
mm,
almost like a stage play in some of those sequences, like in the cabin with the brother. And there's
that's true.
a lot of moving parts to that movie. I was just
Yep.
telling another filmmaker how there's so many ideas, so many layers to that film, and like you were saying about kind of sitting into uh, stepping away from the film and letting it play out and then coming back to it. It's interesting to see, certain ideas that you were baking in, and how they worked, and how they came together. But yeah, so I would probably say Neon Bleed first, and then close it out, have Wired Shut, bring it home,
Really?
as a
Ah.
good like nighttime. Like I said, something about the home invasion has this sort of like kind of creepy, that not like horror. I know that you said they kind of like marketed it like more of a horror film than a home invasion thriller. Did you
Yeah.
say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it kind of
Yeah,
has that
that's
kind of
yeah.
creepy crawly spine tingly nature to it. I think makes for a good nighttime film, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So,
Well,
well, thank you, sir, again for doing this. It's a pleasure to talk, and yeah, look forward
always.
to seeing your next film.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me on the show.
You got it. Thanks for joining me.